Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Andrea Rustad. I am a dermatology resident planning on pursuing a career in pediatric dermatology. I'm so excited to be talking to you today with Dr. Galeria.
Hi, everybody. My name is Noreen Galeria. I am a board certified dermatologist and I have been practicing for about 23, 24 years. I began actually doing dermatology at universities where I was teaching and doing research. And I now, for the last 15 years, have been running three offices outside of the Washington, D.C. area where we do primarily skin cancer. I'm also the founder and the CEO of Interglow Vitamins, which is one of the things that we're going to be talking to you guys about today. And I did want to just take a second to thank you, Andrea, for being on today because I know you have an interest in this. And also, I wanted to take a second to thank Meredith. Thank you so much for allowing us to talk to the community about these additional sun protection methods. I think it's going to be really valuable.
So to start off, let's talk a little bit more about exactly what is Polypodium leucotomus.
So, Polypodium leucotomus is actually a fern that is native to Central and South America. And what we have found, when we started researching this, was that for hundreds of years, tribes that used to live on the equator in Central America or South America, they would actually take the leaves of this fern and brew them as a tea for sun protection. And so, what would happen is, especially people who had skin conditions like sun allergies, or people who were outside for long, hours at the equator, would brew this, drink it, and the locals there knew that if you took this, you would actually get less sunburn and less erythema or redness. And so then, maybe about 20, 25 years ago, researchers really started looking at how do we take these components from the fern and really, kind of extract them so that they're available to the rest of us who don't live, in an area where this is a plant that's easily available. And so there is now, I think at last check, when we look at the medical literature, hundreds and hundreds of studies talking about how polypodium works for sun protection.
Very cool. How exactly does Polypodium work for sun protection?
So, when we think about sun damage, and this is actually something that I think is worth talking about for a second, is the fact that, this fern was never intended so much to protect us. It was actually just evolving to protect itself, right? So, over eons, this fern has actually evolved to protect itself from this harsh equatorial sun. And it did that by creating certain antioxidants and certain polyphenols that would allow it to not shrivel up and, get damaged when the sun was at its hottest. And so when we look at what the sun does to human skin, there's really three things that we're trying to prevent. We're trying to prevent sunburn. We're trying to prevent skin aging, which we know is caused by the sun. And then, of course, the biggest thing that we are all trying to prevent is skin cancer. And the beauty of polypodium is that it has ingredients in it. It has antioxidants in it that help to protect us against all three. And so when it comes to sunburn, if you take it, you will sunburn slower and it'll help the redness to go away faster if you continue taking it. For photoaging, it actually slows the breakdown of our collagen. And then when it comes to skin cancer, we actually know that there is some direct DNA damage that comes from the sun, and polypodium helps to kind of mop up some of that damage in the cytoplasm so that it doesn't lead to, as much DNA damage. And so I think, the reason that compared to other antioxidants, people have really honed in on the protection of polypodium is because it does allow us to really, affect so many things that the sun does that we're trying to prevent.
Very cool. And of course, people with Gorlin syndrome, sun protection is so key. And I know so many of you are already so on top of sunscreen, frequent reapplication, UPF clothing, hats. And our thought is maybe this will kind of give another layer to just help you a little bit more from the inside out.
Yes, I like to kind of say this is like another tool in your toolbox, your sun protection toolbox. It's definitely not a replacement for anything anybody is doing, but I do think that it is a very, very helpful add-on. And I think, one thing that's worth mentioning it is it is different. So it's mechanistically different than sunscreen. So
Mhm.
sunscreen is critical, but it forms a layer of protection on our skin. Because this is something that is a plant that we're ingesting. The nice thing about this is it does give us protection, but unlike sunscreen, it also also does repair. And repair is something I think, especially in Gorlin, it would be very nice if we could get a little bit more of.
Yeah, that's so cool. How did you first get interested in polypodium?
So one of the places that I used to work was Utah. And so I was an assistant professor at the University of Utah. And, some people may know Utah actually has the highest rate of skin cancer
Oh,
in all of America. And so I was seeing these cancer patients who were doing everything, everything, Andrea, that you just mentioned, right? They were doing hats and sunscreen and sunglasses, and they just kept coming in and they had more and more skin cancers. And frankly, they were frustrated, and they were worried about their kids.
yeah.
And so a lot of these patients started saying to me, "What else can I do? What else is natural? How else can I protect my skin?" And that really, kind of sent me down this decade-long rabbit hole of, how do we use things in nature to really help to protect ourselves? And one of the things that really came out on top was polypodium. And so I started recommending it in the US. Supplements are not regulated by the FDA.
Mhm.
And so sometimes people would pick up a good supplement and sometimes it wouldn't be so good. There were formulations that were not really easy for younger people to take. And so, that's kind of really got what got me started down this path.
So why did you end up developing the gummy formulation? I think you kind of alluded into that last line, but let's hear a little bit more.
Yeah. So, I mean, who doesn't like a gummy, right? I have four kids of my own, and actually, one of my kids has a sun allergy. And so, when she was on swim team, she could be out for a very, very short, amount of time before she would be like, "Mom, I have a rash and my skin is burning." And so, I was actually trying to give her polypodium that used to come in capsule form, and I would kind of open up the capsule, I would dump it onto applesauce, and it was gritty and it tasted kind of, grainy and leafy. And it was just hard. It was hard for me to practically get it in for my kids. What we did was we began trying to figure out, not just for my kids, but, for my patients, my kids, like the impetus was the people around me. I wasn't actually trying to create a supplement line at that point. I was just trying to improve the research that was out there. And eventually I realized, nothing existed. So we ended up with this line. But what we did was we took the leaf and we tried to really, kind of extract it in a way that it would remain very, very potent. And there's a kind of a patent pending extraction process that we use called polylucora. And with that process, we were able to get a lot of the ingredients that are necessary from the polypodium into a small, into a kind of like a very concentrated amount. And that allowed us to create a gummy. We're the only clinically proven sun protection gummy, maybe worldwide, but definitely in America. And we have a lot of research behind it because once we created it, then, I was giving it to my kids all along and my nieces and things, but we did really want to make sure it was proven. So we started giving it to independent labs to test to make sure it really did increase the time it took for people to get a sunburn.
Very cool. And especially the fact that you were starting looking at this in kids is so important because, as we know, the majority of sun damage really does occur before the age of 18. So that was really like
Exactly.
insightful of you to kind of start thinking like, how can we help kids take this? They don't want to take a pill. And like you said, the oral powder is just not necessarily the most fun. So I'm sure that our listeners are wondering, is this safe for kids? I know you started testing it in kids, but would love to know a little bit more about the safety data.
We actually have several studies now that are published and several posters that have been presented at our dermatology meetings, like the Society for Pediatric Dermatology. We also have a large group that gets together every year called the American Academy of Dermatology, which is the largest grouping of dermatologists that come together for a conference. In published papers and at conferences, we've now shown that children over the age of 2 can actually take this gummy. So as long as you can chew is what I always say. If you're still not chewing well at 2, well, then don't take it. But
Yeah.
anybody over the age of 2 can take it. And, as you mentioned, yes, sun damage before the age of 18 is really, a major a major thing that causes damage later on in life that can lead to skin cancer. And so it was important to me to get it into those kids, and into my own kids. And so the way that we have tested it in kids is you give it to them 1 hour before they go outside, because it takes about an hour for that to get into your body. And then actually the wonderful thing and the beautiful thing about maybe someone with Gorlin or someone who's sun sensitive who might want to use it is that you can safely repeat this every 4 hours or so. And so a lot of the dermatologists in our studies, when they were studying it in kids, would give it to people and say, okay, every every 4 hours, if you're still outside, I want you to take two more gummies. I think that we can feel very comfortable knowing that people have taken this in many times higher than the two gummy dose. And we even have a patient, and this is just really just for people to feel comfortable about the safety. We had a child who took I would say maybe 3/4 of a bottle in a day. So it
Oh,
was a young kid, maybe 3 or 4 years old. She just liked the taste of it. And so she kept on eating it. Dad didn't notice. And she was fine, not even a stomach ache. And so, not that I advocate for that, but I was very happy to see that she didn't have any side effects after taking a higher dose of it.
that's great. I know I definitely ate a lot of gummy vitamins sometimes as a kid because I was like, oh, these are so good. So that I could totally see somebody doing that too. As some of the listeners might know, I've been working with the Gorlin Syndrome Alliance to write a children's book on Gorlin syndrome together with a wonderful medical student named Natalie, and it will be coming out this summer, which we're so excited about. And of course, we really
Amazing.
focus a lot on sun protection as a huge theme in our book. It's so critical for people with Gorlin syndrome. We've talked a little bit about this, but I think one of the biggest questions that we want to talk about in this video today is how do we think polypodium could be a helpful addition to our sun protection routine?
It's a great add-on for especially somebody who has Gorlin, right? Patients who have it are genetically predisposed, as we know, to getting basal cell cancers. And that's because of kind of this pathway dysregulation that we talk about. And if we could give people something that would reduce the sun-induced DNA damage, it is probably going to be helpful. Has this been studied specifically? It hasn't yet, and that's something, we're hoping to pursue. But I think if we know that we have a fern that will decrease sun-induced DNA damage. It'll decrease our reactive oxygen species and our free radical damage, and it'll decrease immunosuppression. I think it's a great add-on. It's a great add-on for somebody who maybe is a little bit more sun sensitive.
We talked a little bit about studies in other conditions, and we together have worked on a study for polypodium in kids with polymorphous light eruption, which, as you said, is like a sun allergy. And we
Mhm.
had about 20 patients that were kids, and they all showed that it was helpful, and they did not have any safety adverse reactions, which was really great. Have there been any other studies in other skin conditions with polypodium?
Thank you for that, Andrea. I really appreciate your work on that study. So, sun allergy is a big area of interest for Interglow because we do, like I said, my own daughter had it, and we have seen, very, very positive results in all of the patients. We've also seen patients who maybe are on medications like Accutane, which makes you sun sensitive. They benefit a lot from it, but also conditions like eczema. So, if somebody has eczema, we've seen that taking polypodium can decrease the itch that people have in eczema. And we even have some patients with very specific sun conditions like porphyria that have benefited.
Well, very exciting. These conditions can really all be so hard to manage. As many people with Gorlin know, like you can wear so much sunscreen and hats and UPF clothing, but it's still so hard to prevent like that sun exposure. And we of course still want people to enjoy the outdoors. So any additions that help and are
Yes.
safe can be such a game changer. This is so wonderful that you're doing all these many things. And I'm just curious, like what's coming next for Interglow?
We actually have a great product coming out next week. So we have Interglow Soul Defense, which is the one we've been talking about. And next week, something is coming out called Soul Defense Pro. So it's the professional line. And I think for anybody who is an adult who has Gorlin syndrome, I actually like this product maybe as much or more than the gummy. And I feel like, the gummy is great when you're going to be out in the sun. This next product is something I think people would really be taking every day. And the way that it works is it will still have the polypodium, which I think is so critical. But in addition to that, we're adding nicotinamide, which we know when you take nicotinamide every day, it decreases the number of basal cells that people can get.
Mhm.
And we're also adding astaxanthin, which is a carotenoid. It's an algae actually that comes from the sea. And the reason that we've paired these three together is our research has shown that they're not just three, antioxidants that we're kind of lumping together. They work at three different parts of the cell. So the nice thing about this is UV damage, can occur right at the level of the cell membrane. And so what astaxanthin does is it protects us from letting as much sun damage get in. And then polypodium works on the inside of the cell, and that will help to mop up some of the sun that gets in. And nicotinamide works at the DNA level, so where the damage actually occurs. And we know that nicotinamide in other studies has shown to be very, very helpful at repairing and preventing that DNA damage. And so I'm really excited about this line. The code that we have will also apply to this when it comes out next week. I think the professional line is really going to be very, very helpful for our skin cancer patients.
That's really great. I love the combination of all of those things together too. So it's not like people are having to take multiple pills just to kind of get all of those benefits. That's really wonderful.
Yes, exactly.
Anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
So I would just like to add, Interglow is non-GMO, it's vegan, it's sugar-free, it's obviously herbal, and it's made in an FDA registered facility. So the FDA doesn't, regulate supplements, but we can make them in the same way that medicines are made. And so that is how we produce it, and we third-party verify it you know, to prove that what we say is in it is actually in it. I thank you guys for, listening. And, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to email. And thank you, Andrea, for being on with me today.
Yes, thank you. That's so wonderful. Thanks, everybody. I hope you learned something and don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions. And have a great
Bye-bye.
summer without any sunburns.
Exactly. Bye-bye.